Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Season Gaming special. Tonight, Bert and I are going to talk about the Xbox One X. We've spent a few weeks with it now. We have played a ton of games on it, kind of examined the hardware, examined a ton of titles, and we wanted to give our review of it. We wanted to do that, only after we had spent a good amount of time with it and done a number of comparisons between the standard Xbox One and Xbox One X platforms. Bert as well also has a gaming PC. That's a good kind of comparison for the Xbox One X, so he took a look at that. But we're going to kind of run through the kind of everything about the console from when it was first announced and its specs to what Microsoft promised to eventually what was delivered. And like I said, finally, our personal thoughts on it. So we're going to start kind of going back to E3 of last year, E3 2016, when Phil Spencer came out and announced Project Scorpio. And what they promised at the time in Microsoft is they said that this would be the most powerful console ever. It would play games better than any other console before it, and it would be the best place to play, essentially. So the first thing we were touching on here is the methodology and the design. Did Microsoft's promise of it being that special console and being that high-end premium console was a word they used a number of times. Do we think that was, did that come to fruition? Is what they said true? So Bert, you want to kick off your initial thoughts about the console design and its feel itself?
Yeah, so really quick design. I do love design of the Project Scorpio, not only from a visual standpoint, but also from what they kind of promised and everything that kind of goes along with it. If you kind of compare it to the Xbox One S, and I don't have my launch console with me here, unfortunately, but the One S, I mean, they're very similar in size and everything, but the crazy thing is everything that's jam-packed into something this size. We're not here to give you technical specs or what's inside of the console or anything along those lines, but if you get a chance, you should take a look at what is in the One X from a console and hardware perspective. It's pretty amazing as to what they were able to throw into a home console. Same size, plug and play from the One S to the One X is kind of mind-boggling if you think about it. But yeah, I'm kind of blown away with it. We didn't really know a lot about what it looked like when Phil Spencer initially came out back at that E3. We just knew that it was going to be kind of a powerhouse from a hardware perspective. But seeing it about a year later and seeing what it actually is in our hands has been kind of breathtaking for me in general from a home console perspective. So very impressed overall with the basic side of it from the physical side.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was Eurogamer, Digital Foundry guys that said it's console hardware pushed to the next level, and I would agree with that entirely. You and I both own every console top to bottom, and I can't think of a time, and I've told other people this, but I can't think of a time when I bought a new console and was so impressed just from a hardware perspective. As you said, it's very sleek, it's industrial looking. It looks like its sole purpose is playing games. It's very simplistic in its design, kind of like the S was as well. And it's incredibly solid, and I just pretty amazed by it that such a small piece of hardware can perform so well. So I think moving on from the hardware itself, I think the biggest thing that was a question mark coming into it was how Microsoft said that, and they've stated this several times, is that their biggest effort behind the Xbox One X was for developers. And the development kit was a huge focus for them, focusing on, optimizing the engines that are currently used by most developers, whether that's, Unreal or Frostbite or Unity or all the other, kind of engines that are optimized out there, and making it easy for developers to get the most out of the box. So even though that it's, quoted as a 6 teraflop machine, what have you, that it actually performs at a level of a higher end PC with a higher end graphics card and CPU, even though the CPU, isn't the newest or strongest in the Xbox One X. So I think, what are your thoughts around what we've seen from development teams' perspectives, what developers are getting out of it, the number of Xbox One X enhanced games that we've seen at launch?
Yeah, so first of all, the enhancements have been kind of a treat in general. Kind of seeing what was available at launch. Obviously, we have more stuff coming. And if you look at that long list of enhancements, there's a lot of games that haven't released yet that are getting an enhancement. So it's really nice to see those run. You and I were kind of the ones that try to download all the patches before the One X came out. So we did get to see the games running on the One S with the HDR support with a lot of those games. A good example would be Gears. We knew that it was going to look great and everything, but when we see what developers did and they added enhancements on top of that, whether it be native 4K, whether it be a better frame rate, it's really kind of impressive to kind of see what came from this box to this box and seeing the differences back to back. You and I also seem to have TVs upstairs or in other rooms of our house that are not with the One X, and it's really hard to go back to the One S on an enhanced game and to kind of see the way they kind of mix up and what you lose from that fidelity and the quality and the loading times. It's pretty massive for me. I have a 1080p TV upstairs, and then I have the OLED downstairs. So seeing those two things change seems to be almost rough. It's like going from the TVs and Blu-ray differences from watching a movie. So gameplay-wise, same thing. It's kind of crazy. How about you? Do you see the same thing when you play your console?
Yeah, I've been absolutely amazed, to be honest. Developers have been rather outspoken about it and said that the hardware is incredibly impressive. We've heard a whole bunch of quotes from different developers, third party and internal to Microsoft, saying that it's it's just incredibly powerful technology or powerful console hardware. And so, the ARC developer gave it the equivalent of like a 1070 Ti with, or 1070, GTX with 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is really impressive when you think about it from a console for $500. And we're seeing the results. I think it's, I think that it's only going to continue. If you think about it, developers only got the development kits with the finalized SDK here in October. So while they've been working on it for maybe a few months and it's supposedly very easy and quick to get the best out of the hardware, I'm really now imagining what the 2018 games would be like. I'm especially picturing things like Cyberpunk 2077 or Red Dead Redemption 2 should be absolutely stunning on it next year. I'm really pumped about that.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to touch on too is that not only the X1 games that are out are enhanced, but you also have 360 games that are seeing 1X enhancements as well. And that's really cool to see because games like Halo 3, Gears 3, they've had actual, different types of textures that were added to the game. And you can see that added in the game if you look at them side by side. And it's also cool to kind of see, as you were mentioning, Digital Foundry, Eurogamer, when they do comparisons to kind of show you what's difference between the two. It's kind of crazy that we're seeing last generation being enhanced as well, not just the current generation. So I really like that too. And one other cool thing that I wanted to touch on before we move on too far is that we're kind of moving to a PC type of standpoint to where you get a standard PC, you have your game, you're liking it a lot, but then your graphics card gets outdated or whatever, you get a new graphics card, you can play that same game with your new stuff enhanced as well. So we're kind of seeing the same thing with old games, whether it be original Xbox 360 and now the X1 and 1X, we're kind of seeing the same thing with the backwards compatibility. That's really nice. So that's a big thing that a lot of people aren't touching on. Some of your older software sees enhancements from not only, like I mentioned, textures, but loading times and things like that. So I've been really impressed with that. I'm kind of liking what Xbox is doing with their entire ecosystem to where you can play games that were kind of older and you can still play them all in one box, kind of like you do with the PC world and kind of what the PC world has been raving with their master race conversation. So, very cool. You can't do that with any other consoles at the current time. Nintendo, they like using the Virtual Console, and you got to buy that game 3 or 4 times just to get the latest screen or controller to play with it. But not this one. You got everything on this one box, and it's very nice to see. So very cool.
Yeah, I think it's almost a separate topic, right? But the work that Microsoft has done on the platform as a whole has been just as impressive over the past 18 months or so, between the original Xbox 360 backwards compatibility, now original Xbox, and the improvements you just see, as you said. It's just like plugging in a new piece of hardware. It runs all the games you already own, but better, even without the X enhancements, as you pointed out. So one of the neat things has been people going back to older games, either Xbox One, Xbox 360, and just saying, hey, this game runs amazingly well on the Xbox One X. And you kind of see that across the board. So the level of optimization that they did with the hardware is just it's fantastic. So one of the big concerns when it was the price point was announced at this year's E3 at $499. Now, we weren't surprised by that. We kind of, expected that. Some people even expected higher given the specs. But, a lot of people kind of came out and said it's dead on arrival at $499. No console has ever sold well above $400. The PS4 Pro is, $400, et cetera, et cetera. But as we pointed out several times, the market has changed. In the sense that people want the newest, the latest, the greatest. We see $1,000 smartphones. We see, people upgrading to newer and better things all the time. And consumer spending in the segment is higher than it's ever been. So we thought that it would sell very well, and I'm kind of proud to say we were right on that aspect. It has sold extremely well. Consumer response has been fantastic, and we're just seeing. I haven't seen any negative comments about it. In fact, everyone that owns it seems to just rave about it, us two included. So, what are your thoughts on terms of market response to the platform?
Yeah, I've actually been kind of impressed with the market response. I mean, obviously in social media, you're going to run across some very biased people that will find ways to kind of complain about stuff. You see the PC crowd complaining about things and the cost is too expensive for a home console, but it never made sense to me how you can spend $600-700, sometimes $800 on a video card alone, and just get a video card. You're not even dealing with the RAM, the motherboard, everything else that comes along with the PC. So I've always been kind of surprised by that. I've also been surprised at some of the original feedback that came out when the cost was announced, as to people that all of a sudden didn't care about resolution or frames per second, but did care about it when other consoles were releasing an Xbox advantage. So hypocritical comments, what can you do with that? But now that we have the console, it's really nice to see what was kind of released, the feedback that's coming out, even viewing some of the big sites that were kind of down on the console back when it was initially released. We're finally seeing people saying, hey, they actually delivered on what they promised. And now that we've tried the enhancements and everything, it's really cool to see that kind of happening. So I'm glad to see some unbiased feedback coming back on it. And it's cool to see that the overall population is enjoying what they're seeing from a third party and first party perspective. So how about you? What are your thoughts from feedback so far?
Yeah, I think the point that's most valid there is that, when the specs were announced and last year, that what we heard a lot of was there's no way in hell that thing's going to run games in 4K, in native 4K. And it's no way it's going to run or improve things like frame rates and whatever else with that CPU. And in fact, Microsoft kept doubling down saying, yes, it will. And, we were promising a native 4K experience. And I have, we've seen it, right? We're seeing native 4K games and first and third party games all over the place. More and more are coming. That I would assume that once developers get a better handle on it, they're just going to push it further and further. So I've seen, as you said, a lot of the big sites who were maybe a little down on it or indifferent to it when it was announced have now said, look, Microsoft promised and delivered. And like I said, I haven't seen any negativity around it other than the biased people. But I mean, from a realistic standpoint, I haven't seen anyone saying, hey, this console's really not that great. It's mostly been all positives, which is a really good thing for Microsoft in the sense that they're turning that image around that Xbox One had, that kind of negative stigma that it had early on in the console generation with Kinect and the underpowered piece and all that. So this, I think the Xbox One X is a huge boost to them in terms of the market.
Yeah, and that was really one of the cool things that Digital Foundry did, and one of the reasons we keep bringing them up is because they have some really good comparisons, whether it's side by side or they just run a technical analysis on the console altogether. Is that when the console was releasing a few days before, when the embargo lifted and they could talk about the software, it was really cool seeing them actually compare it to PC, PS4, PS4 Pro, and kind of showing you the differences and just simply stating, hey, this one's got a higher resolution and stuff. So from a power perspective, very nice. I've liked everything that they've kind of promised as we were talking about. So really happy with the results of what we're seeing so far.
Yeah, me as well. All right, so that's kind of, since it was announced to now, the market response. So let's just talk about our personal opinions on it. I mean, what games have really jumped out to you? What, is there anything about the console that even blew you away more than you anticipated? Has it met all of your expectations? Anything you'd like to see that you haven't seen?
Yeah, so a couple of funny things. First of all, we both run our systems, our One S and the original Xbox, are running off SSDs. So we've always had kind of a fast loading time, and one of the things that I haven't noticed a massive difference on is loading times, because we're once again running our SSDs that we had been running on the One S are now running on the One X. So if you have not run on SSDs or even an external hard drive with a faster spinning hard drive, you're probably not going to see massive load time differences on the One X because you're more than likely going to bring that external onto here. But they are slightly different, and I have seen some tests on them, and they're by 4 or 5 second differences. But one of the biggest things that I'm seeing popping is the HDR in a lot of games. So Gears, Injustice 2, Forza. Wow, the HDR has kind of blown me away from that. And also, we're not seeing any blurry curves around graphics anymore. So kind of the blurry stuff that you see in some games that we used to see before, or textures that didn't load properly. loading extremely fast and super clear now. So the new textures that they're loading from the graphical perspective have kind of blown me away. But yeah, as far as the games that kind of made me just wow, Forza, when you saw the weather changes and the sky differences was big. I did mention Injustice because that one looked good already. But wow, seeing that with the 1X patch and everything, that blew me away, especially with the backgrounds and the clarity of the characters are so much nicer now. But yeah, Gears, we always talk about Gears and other things there. F1 2017, a game that I spent tons of time on the Pro, actually looks better on the 1X. But how about you? You've kind of made me super jealous with a few screenshots from a few games that I really want that I haven't got yet.
Oh, yeah, so I kind of went overboard, as I tend to do with a new console release, and kind of picked up almost all the new games. So yeah, in particular, Assassin's Creed Origins is mind-boggling at times in terms of the picture quality. Wolfenstein 2, Digital Foundry ran a test on that Xbox One X, and it's running at native 4K most of the time, and it's really sharp in places. Those games just look fantastic. Gears, as you mentioned, is Gears and Halo 5. Being first party, we kind of knew that would be the case, but those two are excellent as well. And really, as you said, almost every game, we were kind of just putting games in one after another and being blown away. And I think it's due to two reasons. One, the hardware is really impressive, as we've mentioned, but two, we were 4 years into the console generation, and the Xbox One was the least powerful console, compared to the base PS4 when they launched. So it's really no surprise that going from a base Xbox One or even Xbox One S to the X shows such a marked difference. It's kind of what we expected, and I'm just glad to see that it's come to fruition. The sharpness and the clarity on the textures, as you said, are fantastic. The HDR support is amazing. I think what really surprised me, though, is the color depth. So as you mentioned, we're playing on OLEDs, which already show tremendous, color depth and contrast. But even on a standard image, put the textures and the resolution and the sharpness aside, the color depth in these games is really accentuated by the Xbox One X, even versus the Xbox One S, even both running HDR, which is something that I didn't truly expect. So it's really hard to put into words what this looks like on a fully calibrated, proper 4K TV with HDR. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. It's probably it's the most I've been blown away in a very long time by a console, maybe since I first saw the Neo Geo, going way back. What are your kind of closing thoughts? What would you like to see? Is there what are you most anticipating kind of going into 2018? And are there anything you would hope to see going forward with the console?
Yeah, you kind of touched on it earlier. It's the games that we have yet to see. So as I've touched on this before on some of our SG conversations and even some of our vidcasts, but when a console releases, you have what's considered the first generation of games, second generation, third, etc. in that console generation. And we're currently at a point in this generation where we're not really at the end of the generation. We're kind of like in the sweet spot before the final games are coming out this generation. And these developers have yet to really grasp the full power of the One X. I would say Star Wars Battlefront 2, which I'm surprised we both forgot about that when we're talking about stuff because it looks amazing. Origins, these are games that are technically currently out, but they haven't really spent a ton of time and have mostly developed it for the power of the Pro and the One X. And so come 2018, the fall, I'm guessing some in the spring, we're going to see some titles that are going to blow us away. You touched on Red Dead Redemption, some stuff like that's coming out for both consoles, cross-platform, and even first party. So you have yet to see a tease of Halo. I'm sure that'll kind of blow us away. That'll probably be designed for the One X, and that'll kind of change our entire idea of what we thought Halo 5 looked like. So when you take a look at Halo 5 on the One X, I put it in the other day. I was like, man, this looks like a current generation, not a game that's a year old, whatever the case is with DLC. And I was blown away. So we have still yet to see the max of what the One X can offer. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. I don't really know anything else that I'm really looking forward to aside from the new titles that are coming out. I've been pretty happy with load times. There's a few games that drive me crazy with load times, but nothing too much that I just can't do anything with. But I like what I see. I like what the future holds, and I'm happy for some more enhancements. If I was to name some enhancements that I wish I had today, would be Prey. I wish I had Doom, and maybe a couple other small ones that are kind of older. I wish we had The Witcher 3 just to kind of see that running in full 4K. Man, that's going to be amazing when we finally get that. But we have to be patient for them. We do want the best product from there, and that's me on that one.
Yeah, you mentioned Witcher 3, which I was going to mention as well, of course. I'm waiting on that one. I'm hoping that CDPR is taking their time with it to kind of, push it as far as possible. And with so many games right now that I'm playing, I wouldn't mind waiting because I know once I dive into that again, I'm going to be in trouble. So, but yeah, Doom and Prey are two other ones I'm really hoping for as well. And I did notice today that and I don't think you or I are waiting on this one, but the Skyrim Xbox One X enhancement is coming soon now, is listed on the site with 4K. So it'd be interesting to see how far they push Skyrim, given as old as it is. But I know there's some mods on the PC side that really, make it look amazing. So we'll see. But yeah, final thoughts here. I would say that it's been one of the most impressive console launches I've seen in a long time, even though it's weird because it's a mid-generation, refresh, as they're calling it, which is kind of new to the industry. But I have not been as happy with a console purchase as I have with the Xbox One X in a very long time. It's a fantastic piece of hardware. From a design perspective, it's incredibly impressive, and I get a little geeky with the technical side, so I love that about it. It's amazing what they did with such a small, form factor, and it runs every game better, just like they said it would. It's going to be the best place to play third-party games for probably until whatever the next Xbox and PlayStation 5 arrive, which will probably be at least probably 3 years from now, if it was my guess. So I'm very, very happy with it. I would say that if you're one of those people who is questioning whether they should upgrade, or questioning whether, maybe you don't own an Xbox One or haven't jumped in on the Xbox One this generation and thinking, should I buy an X? If you have the means to do so, I would absolutely recommend it. It's the best place to play nearly every game now, other than maybe the first-party exclusives on the Sony side. Lastly, I would say that, and we've talked about this before, but don't be wary if you don't have a 4K TV. I've talked to a ton of people who are running on 1080p. I haven't tested it myself, Bert. I don't know if you can comment on this, but nearly everyone who's playing on a 1080p is commenting pretty much the same thing, that the image is far superior, gets rid of all the aliasing, the load times are better, the colors are better. Everything that has like a dynamic resolution or variable refresh rate runs at its max potential automatically without even needing a patch. So it's still absolutely worth it, even if you haven't upgraded to a 4K TV yet. And of course, then you're future-proofed as well, right? Through the rest of this generation, you'll have the best console when you do get that 4K TV. So that's really my final thoughts. Love it. Highly recommended. And I'll let you kind of close us out.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, kind of echo what you just mentioned with TVs and stuff. So just keep in mind that even if you have a 1080p TV, that some of the games that were on the standard 1S or the Xbox, if you have the original, there's enhancements that are not just 4K. So to Ains's point, you are going to get that enhancement from the 1080p side. Take a look at it. Once again, you're future-proofed. However, this is very discounted right now. I think Black Friday deals are going for $180 for that, and maybe even a game bundled. So if you need to kind of try it out, take a look at that, maybe a used option, and then jump to this when you can. But if you do have that 4K TV, you do have an HDR TV that's compatible with 4K. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You gotta grab this. So we don't usually do numbers or scores or anything like that with consoles, but I would say that we're both very, very happy with our console purchase. We're very happy with the price, and hopefully you find some fun with it too. So thanks for listening in.
Great. Appreciate everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and we will talk to you soon.